Hello, welcome back to another Corrective Culture podcast. We've got Joe Whitton with us today, which is friggin' awesome.
Yeah, huge, huge, huge. How you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good. So for the people, as a little intro for you, we first met. Well, knew of you through Kathy, who's now your coach, who's one of our friends, and she made us your trifle for Christmas.
Woohoo!
And it was incredible. Actually,
good.
To be honest, actually, your cookbook is my number one cookbook in the world. Okay?
Aw, thank you.
And actually,
The apple pie was what got me. I was like, this is the best dessert I've ever had.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you had the apple pie. You're like, fuck, that's insane.
Yeah, so we got both your books now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? Desserts, they win hearts, right? What can I say?
Without a doubt.
I think that's actually because a lot of people can have, know how to cook their meat and veg, or not that good actually, because when I grew up, I was having well done steak and boiled veggies a lot of the time.
Oh, no.
But when you throw desserts in there and it honestly tastes like it's tricking me. You know what I mean? It tastes like I'm eating something like I shouldn't be eating, but I'm like, whoa, this is nuts. It's got gelatin, it's got this. And I tell people this is tightening your skin, this is doing this. And it's like, it's incredible, really. And I think that's what people need when they first jump in their health journey. Because if you can throw a couple of those recipes at them, like I made your chocolate bark the other day. Mm-hmm. And that's so easy because I like easy, quick things. And we got a thermo. And I love that your recipe book has the conventional method and the thermo method, which I was like, this was a game changer.
Yeah,
absolute game
Well,
changer.
I'm trying to cover as many bases as I can because the aim for me is to help people with their health. So, whatever you use, let's try and work out a way to do it easily.
Yeah, for sure. And there's actually, what we're going to get into is like there's a photo that I opened in the last book. So the two books, the two ones I have are Life-Changing Food and Simple Healing Food. And Simple Healing Food is the more recent one. You just released that, didn't you?
Yeah, 5th of January.
Wow. And how long does it take you to put something like that together? Because there's so much in that.
That one was about 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a lot of the recipes were developed longer than that, further back for my online gut health program that I started about 6 years ago. So, and then I just kind of tweaked them and updated them a bit for the book.
So what is your online gut health program? Like what, for a rundown for people?
It's actually on pause at the moment, the old one. It was one that I started back when we'd been doing the GAPS protocol for 6 months, and it had changed our lives so much. And I had so many questions from my community about it, about what we were doing, because they could see how much it had helped, and I'd been talking about it. And so I decided to develop a program because I got so many questions about, well, how do I start? Well, what do I cook? So I thought if I do a program that has the practical side of things, like you can go and read all the theory and understand it, but to put it into practice in everyday life is where most people get very overwhelmed. And so that's what I wanted to help people with. And so it's got like recipes for each stage of the GAPS protocol, and how to get started and how to make the basics and all of that kind of stuff. And now I also have a program in collaboration with an integrative nutritionist, Elise Comerford, and we work on helping people to get started with gut health in a really simple way. The very first week, you don't even change anything. All you do is work on reducing stress. And then it's very small steps for healing, with healing foods and things like that. But those are the two programs I have. But at the moment, we're just running the gut health formula program.
Is that like a subscription-based thing or?
It's a one-off sort of thing where it's an 8-week program, but then you have access for a year and you can download everything anyway. That's
amazing. That's amazing.
That's really cool. So how did you get into health? Like what was the turning point?
Getting sick, like most people.
Yeah, the pain's the best teacher, right?
Yeah. And the funny thing is when it's just your pain, you can sort of push it away and, if I have a bit of dairy, sure, I react, but, I get over it in a couple of days and I love cheesecake and, I just went through most of my, up to my early 20s, just sort of dealing with all the food intolerances and the constant health issues and thinking, well, this is just my lot in life. It's genetics. I can't really do anything about it. I did try to eat healthier, but I didn't have the knowledge of how to do that. So it was very hit and miss, like, oh, okay, so I went to a dietitian. I was told, drink soy milk instead of dairy. Take these little pills if you do have dairy because it'll help you digest it. What else? I was given medications for my skin. I was told to sprinkle sustagen on all my food because I was underweight. That was pretty gross. Wow. Have you ever had vanilla flavored mashed potatoes?
Oh,
it's not very nice.
Yeah, that's horrible.
And just, I was given a lot of bad advice basically. Of course it didn't help. I didn't gain weight. I didn't get better. I still was reacting to foods and my health actually got worse. And so I kind of gave up for a while thinking, well, there's nothing I can do about it. But then when my kids came along and they started having major health issues and just like you could see the things that I had struggles with, they had, but even worse because as we know that gut health, just every generation is just getting worse if we're not working on it. Yeah, I didn't know anything about gut health back then. I finally started seeing a naturopath when my youngest was 1. I had 4 kids under 7. I was exhausted. I was just really quite unwell, and so were they. I had trouble breastfeeding because my milk, just because of all the food intolerances, basically they'd react to it, they'd scream. Anyway, so started seeing a naturopath, and that's when things started to turn around. And he actually, I'm trying to think, it would have been 17 years ago when I started seeing a naturopath, and he started talking to me about gut health back then, but it was like most of it went over my head. I remember him sitting down and drawing the lining of the gut and how, things were affecting it. And I was just like, he said to have, he got me onto a gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free diet. And it was at first, I started to see a difference. So I started to have less food reactions and less hay fever. And after a year, I'd gained a couple of kilos.
Hell yeah.
I should explain, I got down to 42 kilos when I was 35 with 4 kids.
Wow.
So that's pretty
just
thin.
Depleted, hey? Just depleted.
Yeah, really depleted, really exhausted, had to have a nap every day, very anxious, a lot of colds and chest infections and that kind of thing all the time. And when I started to change my diet, I started to see some small changes in our health, but it wasn't very fast because all I was really doing was limiting foods. I wasn't actually healing. Yeah. And I think that's the mistake a lot of people, well, it's kind of the first step, I guess, for most people is pull back on the foods that are causing you to react. But if you just stay there, nothing's really going to change and you're actually going to get worse. And that's what happened to me.
Really? What were your big foods that really, as in that you had to
Dairy, mostly. Yeah, okay. I couldn't even eat butter or ghee by the time when I got worse. If I had butter, I'd start to get like hay fever. If I had it another day, the next day, I'd start to get like a cold. If I had it 3 days in a row, I'd get these horrible flu symptoms and I'd just be in bed for a week. Yeah. So just the tiniest bit of dairy, I really reacted to.
And you can tolerate ghee now?
Oh, yeah. So after doing a gut healing diet, all the dairy, I'm fine. I don't react.
Wow.
So,
it
took a year of working on gut health and then I could bring the dairy in.
Yeah.
So,
and when you were saying like, because you were just eliminating foods, but you weren't nourishing, so you weren't bringing in nutrients to support as well. You were just eliminating things.
I love naturopaths, but sometimes the one that I had, he was great and he tried to help with diet, but I think they're very busy and they don't have time to, nurture you along with your recipes, say, and diet. And they give you a lot of supplements to fast track things. I spent so many thousands of dollars on supplements and testing, and I didn't get anywhere. But when I started to understand the importance of food for medicine, and started researching gut health and the GAPS diet, I understood that, you know, sometimes supplements are helpful as the cherry on top, if you know what I mean, but the foundational healing will come from the food and lifestyle stuff. So that's where we really focused. And for 2 years, we pretty much didn't take supplements. We just worked on food for healing, and that's when we healed.
Just lots of like broths and slow cooks and
yeah. So are you familiar with GAPS at all? Should I explain?
Actually, can you explain?
I'd love to learn more.
Yeah.
About
What does GAPS stand for, just for people?
So gut and psychology, or gut and physiology syndrome. So it's helpful for both the brain side of things, the mental health issues, that kind of thing. And it's also helpful for physiological health issues, chronic illness. It was developed by a neurologist and nutritionist whose son had autism, and she was trying to help him to have, you know, less symptoms and to heal as much as possible. And she's from Russia. She grew up, Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. She grew up in a village in Russia where she basically got really, really sick as a child with, I've forgotten what the disease is, but her parents sent her to her grandmother, who was basically known as the village healer. And she went to live with her, and she nourished her back to health with fermented milk, fermented food, organic, of course, fruit and vegetables, and meat grown out, you know, the real food, the pasture-raised meat and the good fats and all the traditional foods that they used for healing, as well as herbs and things like that she knew about for healing. And she got better. And they hadn't actually expected her to get better. So she learned from her grandmother how to heal with food and herbs and, you know, real medicine, nature's medicine. And she also studied neurology and nutrition. So she took what she'd learned in all those life experiences and studies and developed a protocol to help her son. And he became so much better that she started using this in her clinic. And then that developed into the GAPS protocol, nutritional protocol.
Wow.
And when I read, well, basically, you just had Cindy O'Meara on your show, I saw.
Yeah.
Cindy was one of the people that told me about GAPS. So we were all on the same podcast and speaking at the wellness summits and everything at the time when my son Isaac hit rock bottom with his health. Should I?
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry if I'm just rambling on, just interrupt me.
I love it.
Yeah, please.
And what you're saying right now, I feel like so many, especially females, can relate to this.
Yeah.
And I think this will really help a lot of people as well. Even your cookbook, like it's that it makes it easy for people to get through to that health. Because I feel, because I grew up with my mum and my sister, and I just see girls. It's just harder because there's all this shit. Like you'll go spend thousands on testing while they're still eating KFC or something, you know? And it's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
So, I just feel like it's like you can go to 10 different people and get 10 different opinions and, you know. And
spend $10,000.
Yeah. And it's like, and now, and for people like you and us, and it sort of feels like we've unplugged out of the matrix a little bit and it's all a bit simple. So not so complicated anymore. Exactly.
It was so complicated. Yeah. And trying to remember to take every different supplement at every different time. And like that always did my head in, and I always ended up wasting stuff because I'd be like, oh, that's all too hard. But when we started to hear about the importance, so basically the catalyst for the gut healing came when so my son Isaac, he was 11 and he started to really exhibit signs of anxiety and really odd behavioral stuff, like very sensitive, you know, the whole can't put socks on because he'd scream and throw them, and, you know, can't just everything. He was sensitive in so many ways. And I just thought that was his personality. he'd scream, he was loud, he was very happy most of the time, but very intense and sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was 11, he started having these weird phobias and started, I homeschooled, and whenever he was starting to learn about diseases and stuff, if he started to write about it, he'd freak out and start scrubbing it out off his book. And it turns out he thought that if he wrote the word, he would get the disease. And all these kind of strange phobias started happening. He had a phobia of the little girl next door who'd never done anything to him. She's just the little girl next door that would come and play. And as soon as she came, he'd run to his room and lock the door and cry and say, don't let her in. And we were just like, what in the world?
Mm-hmm.
And I've always had this gut feeling that food heals. And so even when I was like 19, off at uni, having terrible health issues, I kept thinking, what can I do with food? I'm sure there must be something. And that's why I went to a dietitian, but didn't really get any help. And so when Isaac started really struggling, I thought, I'm going to pull the food back to, I'm going to try grain-free, dairy-free, sugar-free. And within a week or so, he started to calm down. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Is that a coincidence? And I kept going for another week or so, and he seemed to settle. And I was like, okay, maybe it was just something that happened. And you know how we humans don't learn things quickly. I was like, I'll just, it's okay to have a little bit of this and that and a little bit of sugar and a little bit of this and that. It's sort of all crept back in again. Like we ate mostly healthy and whole food, but there was sugar and there was flour and things like that. And I started to think, well, maybe it's just a stage of life and he'll get over it. And so we had a lot of ups and downs where he'd get worse. I'd pull back on the diet. He'd get better. I'd get slack. He'd get worse. And it was the same with my health until he was 13. And then almost overnight, it seemed like he just crashed big time. He started having such major phobias and fears that he was pretty much incapacitated. He couldn't do anything. He started repeating actions. He started having things that he could see that we couldn't see. It was very freaky. Like he'd just be standing there and he'd be looking over your shoulder, screaming and throwing his arms around saying, get the rocks away, get them away. They're closing in on me. And I'd be like, there's nothing there. Mm-hmm. He's like, the rocks are closing in. And he wouldn't wear grey because the rocks were going to crush him if he wore grey. And he wouldn't walk a certain way in the kitchen because if he did, I was going to die. And he wouldn't go to the toilet by himself because he couldn't flush it, because if he did, something would happen. And so it ended up I was spoon feeding him at 13. I was dressing him. I was helping him with everything. He would just scream and cry all day long. It was really, really, really awful. I took him to the doctors and we didn't really get any help at first because we didn't know what was going on. But just with all the research, I just researched and read and suddenly one day something popped into my head and I thought, I wonder if this is OCD. I'm going to look up what the symptoms are. I had thought that OCD was just washing your hands all the time and wanting everything tidy. That was my vague idea of what it was. But for some reason it popped into my head and I looked it up and he had every single one of the symptoms. And there was things like phobias of people for no reason. There was things like, all the things. He had them all. Yeah. So I went back to the doctor and I said, I think he has OCD. And then she did just a verbal test and said, oh, he has very severe OCD. He needs to go straight onto medication. He needs to go to the psychiatrist, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, wait. I said, I don't want to put him on medication. But at that stage, we were the whole family was just really, really struggling. And he and I were sitting in the doctor's office crying. And I said, all right, just put him on the medication for now. But I want to get him off in like 6 months. And the doctor's like, oh, you can stay on this for life. It's okay. And people do. And I'm like, he's 13. I don't want to start him on medication for life. And I said, we'll start him, but I'm going to really try and figure out how to heal naturally. So he started on a little bit of basically an antidepressant and it calmed him down. He became like a little zombie, couldn't really, he was just like sleepy. and not his usual self, not really smiley or anything. And at that time, I had really been looking into the whole gut-brain connection and what, I'd heard of it, but I didn't really understand it. So I started really researching that. And that's when I started talking to Cindy O'Meara, Jude Blereau, who is a whole food chef in Perth, who has had a lot of experience with healing with whole foods. Other people, I just talked to everybody I could, asking them, what do you think? What should I do? And the consensus was gut health. It's definitely gut health related. I remember talking through all of our symptoms in our family with one of these people, and they said, you've all got gut health issues. I'm like, really? I didn't think I was sick. So I was like, okay, we need to work on healing the gut. So, after looking into there's all different kinds of variations of gut healing diets. But when I read about the GAPS protocol, it just really clicked with me. And I just thought, no, this is what we need to do. When you just find that thing that you go, this is what we need to do. It just seemed to.
Did it give you a sense of feel of what's the word I'm looking for here? Like I'm going to get through this. Like this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think what also helped was reading other people's stories, and that's why I try to share mine whenever I can. I remember one day Isaac was laying on the floor screaming and sobbing as usual, and I was desperately scouring the internet for stories of how people get well from OCD, because I thought surely, I can find some. And I found a story of a young guy who did heal from OCD. And so I read Isaac the story, and he just sat up. He stopped crying like that, and he said, so you mean people can get better from this? And I said, yes.
Wow.
And that was it. He stood up, stopped crying. He was like, let's do this. Because he realized he wasn't alone. I think that was one of the hardest things for him. He thought he was the only person in the universe suffering this way. He knew that he was living in an alternate reality, but he didn't know how to get out of it. He said, I know it doesn't make sense to you, and I know that what I'm saying isn't real, that there's snakes biting me or the rocks are closing in on me or whatever, but it feels like it's real. And so when he understood that this was a common thing, well, hopefully not too common, but it happens, and that people can heal, that changed everything for him. And he was totally on board. When I found GAPS and we started researching it, he researched it too. He read everything. He listened to the podcasts. He studied the stages of GAPS. And he was more strict than me. Like I would be like, okay, you can have some avocado. And he's like, no, Mum, I'm not up to that yet. I can't have that yet.
Yeah.
He knew.
Yeah.
So he was very much on board. And the family at first was like, oh, no. There was a few slammed doors and things because the other teenagers weren't happy about not having bread for a while. But
Sure.
they wanted their brother to get better. And I said, we have to do this for him. So we're doing it all together. So we did. And basically the premise of GAPS is to really bring in as many nutrient-dense healing foods as possible, just like hack your diet with them. So short-cooked meat stocks, not long-cooked broths. The short-cooked stocks are much easier for your gut to digest, and they have more of the healing amino acids.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So
the longer-cooked bone broths are high in minerals, and the shorter cooked meat stocks are higher in the amino acids that heal the cell walls.
Wow, okay.
So if you're trying to heal a leaky gut, first you start with the short cooked stocks, and then later on you can bring in the long cooked ones for the minerals. But at first
is short cook like 4, 6?
2 hours.
2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. So with chicken, it's like 2 hours. If it's beef or lamb, it's more like 4 hours. But
You
as
can
soon
just
as
eat
you
it
cook
like a
it,
stew,
you
right?
cool it. Hey?
And you can just eat it like a stew, right? Like you could.
Yeah.
Like
So chuck your chicken legs in.
Yeah.
Simmer them, add until they're soft, add your veggies or whatever, I often just do a whole chicken covered in water, salt and pepper. Once it's soft, take it out, cook the veggies in the stock, take some of the chicken off and put it in so it's like a soup. Sometimes I'll roast the chicken after cooking it in the stock, and you get that crispy skin with the, olive oil or butter and herbs, and then you get the crispy
that
skin.
sounds so good.
And then you've got the stock as well.
Yeah.
And I find it tastes better than bone broth. Like bone broth has that, the long cooking time, the taste, and you get that smell in the house and everything.
Yeah.
It's not like that with short cooked stock. It it's just like chicken soup or beef stew or whatever.
Loaded up on herbs and cayenne pepper and bone broth to take that
fresh garlic at the end. So
cool.
So we really started getting into the stocks, slowly adding in fermented foods. And pulling back on the starchy foods, because that's a lot harder for the gut to digest. Anything starchy is the long chain sugars, so your gut has to break each one apart. So while your gut's focusing on breaking down food and digesting, it can't also focus on healing. So it's one or the other, pretty much. Yeah. So you take away all the foods that are difficult to digest, make it really simple for your gut to break down the food, and make it really nourishing and really healing. And the healing process it was so fast. Like for Isaac, within weeks, he was a different kid. Couple of weeks, I saw differences.
Wow.
Within 6 months, I was like, I reckon he could go off the medication. And I talked to the doctor, and she said, yeah, he could. I said, but before we take him off the medication, I talked to it was the psychiatrist. I said to her, do you think it's the medication that's keeping him so stable? And he'd gotten a job at the grocery store. He was like the most outgoing kid there, very happy. He was doing great with his schoolwork again, learning languages. And I said to the psychiatrist, but if we take him off the medication, will he go back to where he was? She said, no. She said, that's not the medication doing that. That's whatever else you're doing. She said the doctors usually doubled the dose within 3 months, and he was still on this tiny dose.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so that gave us the courage to wean him off. But he was a bit scared to at first, and it took him till about 11 months in before he started weaning off. And so within a year, he was off medication.
Cool.
Wow.
So that was... He's 20 now. So that was, 7 years ago that he first started, this journey.
Crucial years too.
Yeah, he hasn't been back on medication.
So you wonder how many other families this has happened to, but didn't see the guidance. And, because I understand that, when you say you were spoon feeding him, that your brain would have been, that would have been the only thing in your mind the whole time.
Yep.
And you would have been thinking, am I going to be doing this when he's 40? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just didn't know what, it's like going through trauma, everything else is just faded away, and you're just stuck in that hole, and you just think, am I ever going to get out of this? Is he ever going to get out of this? And you're so exhausted. And I know parents with kids with special needs or chronic illness, the stress is so exhausting. And that's why Isaac and I both have such a passion for helping these families, because we know what it feels like. It's very lonely. Your friends don't understand. His friends didn't understand at first. He tried to tell them, he'd try to hide it when he saw his friends, but they knew something was going on because he didn't want to go anywhere, do anything. He'd try to hide it, but he had changed, and they could see that. And then when he tried to explain to them the change in diet, at first it was like, well, that's not going to help, And I remember even the doctor, when I was explaining to her what we were doing, I remember her looking away, she couldn't look in my eyes. She was probably thinking, what? Wow. And then 6 months down the track, when he had improved so much, we went back to the doctors, and she's saying to her student doctor, come in here and hear about this diet. It's amazing. Yeah. She bought my cookbook for all the stuff.
Wow.
Sick.
Wow.
Yeah, she's lovely.
That was going to be my next question, because it was going to be do you reckon any one of these medical professionals that were around you learnt from your case, or did they just it's one of those lucky ones, you know what I mean?
I hope they did. She's very open to listening to what we do, and she's a lovely person, and she seemed to me to really be interested in how we did and what we did. And like I said, she bought the cookbook for all the stuff. The psychologist, I always get mixed up with psychologists and psychiatrists. Sorry, I forget which one it is. Yeah. Terrible.
No, psychiatrists are the ones that prescribe drugs, aren't they? And then psychologists are the ones that work on them. Yeah.
But Isaac and I, when he had been doing GAPS for, it was only like 4 or 6 months, we were invited to speak on stage with Pete Evans in Cairns about his journey. Wow. And he got up there and spoke in front of 200 people, no problem, at 13, 14 years old. Whoa, wow. And the psychiatrist came to that. And she was completely in agreement that that's what had helped.
Wow.
So, yeah, wow. I think when, you can tell people this stuff and they think it's weird, but when they see the changes, they can't argue with it. And that's what I said in my book. You were talking earlier about the before and after photos of me. Yeah. You can tell people until you're blue in the face, but until they see the changes, they're not really going to get it. And then when they see the changes, they're like, whoa, okay. Because I know in my own family, when we started GAPS, my mum and dad and my brothers and sisters were kind of like, that's a bit harsh, not letting the kids have any sweets or whatever. And even my husband wasn't really on board. It was all I was the weird one as usual. That's why I called my blog Quirky Cooking though, so I'm used to it.
Yeah, especially I can imagine northern Queensland. It would be real out there, up there, you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, there's a few of us up here that are a bit quirky.
Yeah.
But yeah, my family was like, but then when they started seeing the changes, they just were on board helping. And I was traveling a lot for work still. And I think 3 weeks into starting GAPS, I had to go to Melbourne for speaking. And I said to Mum, you're going to have to help because I need Isaac to be sticking to this diet. It's really important. And so even though she wasn't quite on board at first, she cooked everything that they needed while I was gone. And, they were very supportive, especially once they saw the changes.
Had you all your health issues, were you still lingering with some before you started doing it hard with him? Because that's amazing. Yeah. I see that as like, a mother's love is stronger than the love for herself almost. And then
that's true.
And that's what his illness helped you, but also paved the way to, probably create these cookbooks you've done now and then help thousands of other people, help us.
Oh, I always tell him you're one of my greatest teachers. Like if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have learnt most of this stuff. I would still be just fluffing around with, healthy food, add some spinach to your lasagna.
Fully. That's so good. That's so good.
It was a deep dive and it was hard, but it's been very worthwhile because it's taught me so much, and it's, we've been able to help other people through the difficulties that we've been through. And I think people are much more likely to listen when they know you've been through something as well. Like if you're just this person saying, eat this way and you'll be healthy and blah, 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 but you've never really seen that they've been through the hard yards themselves. It's like, yeah, whatever. You don't know what it's like to live with chronic illness or mental health issues, or you don't know. Yeah. But when we have been through that and we're like, we've been there and we know how hard it is and we know it's overwhelming to try and change anything. But if you do it slowly and gently and step by step, you can change things. And there's always another step that you can take to make life better.
Yeah, experience, and you can tell when you're speaking from a position of experience compared to talking heads. And like I even say this with this is what I tell my clients. I tell them, because like 90% of my clients are disc bulges, right? Disc bulges and some knees. And some people just want to get their posture corrected. But I tell them that, in my opinion, I think food is more important than any exercise or stretch I'm going to give you for you getting out of pain. And I've seen it clinically, like if someone's got bloating, their core won't work, their back will cop it. It's I've said it before.
That's interesting.
Like, and I see it over and over again. It's like I've never seen someone come in with, back pain that wasn't really eating that good either. You know what I mean? Everyone that, has the back pain, they're generally high in omega-6s, high in inflammation and just the basics. And then if you can just change their water and hydrate their body a little bit.
I was about to say that. Sometimes it's so basic, like they don't drink water.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I was thinking like when you said the bit how when you told your son, oh, people can heal from this, and then how you saw it immediately almost heal him a little bit right then, right? And how I have, and I'll send it to, I'll DM it to you. I had a client, little girl, and she was the same process. She wasn't walking. Well, she was walking, but it was almost like cerebral palsy looking sort of walk from a blood clot. And she had multiple people at the hospital tell her she had thick blood, tell her she may never walk properly again. We don't know what's wrong with you because the test couldn't show it. She was only 20, tiny, like 40, I think actually, yeah, about 42 kilos, maybe even lighter. Hey, she's real small. And, and just thought I was done, you know what I mean? And then when I was like, oh, I found out she wasn't drinking water, by the way. That's why her blood was thick. But when I just sort of told her, oh, you're not doing this, this, and this, I was like, we can do so much. She almost walked better out of there. And you could see it was like a different girl walking into my room than walking out. And 2 weeks later, she walked in properly, almost properly. Aww. But within the next couple of months, we cleaned it up. So, and it was just, that was, I believe that was all more mental than any exercise I gave her. And plus I gave her some water, you know what I mean? So that's just good for other people to hear that, like, I'm not big on, you know, if you think someone has 6 months to live, you shouldn't tell them that because you don't know. You know what I mean? Yeah. Jake's mum died of cancer when you were 19. Mm. And how long did they say?
5 years. Yeah.
They told her she had 5 years left.
Yeah. They said you've got 5 years. They said if you last 5 years.
Yeah. That's fucked.
Yeah. But it's the same thing. And I was thinking earlier about how you all of this is so crazy because it's such a good teacher. Like your son was your greatest teacher, of course, because he was sick, but therefore you're going to help millions of people. So it's such a good thing. It's like, it's the biggest gift you can ever be given. So anyone in that situation that feels helpless, it's actually a gift if you can transcend it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I've always said to Isaac. That's always been our attitude, that we're going to get through this and then we're going to help other people get through it.
Yeah, exactly what you're doing. And I really recommend your cookbook to anyone listening. You just released Simple Healing Foods. Love it. And it's got, for people listening, it's got like how you make ghee, I didn't know you can make your own coconut milk. I thought coconut milk is grown in a can. Like,
this has been a discussion because I'm drinking this like organic coconut milk because I'm off coffee at the moment. Yeah. And it's got guar gum in it. And it's the only bad, and I'm like, fuck, like I can't find a good coconut.
What is guar gum and why is it not ideal?
Oh, it's just another processed gum, and a lot of these things they say, oh yeah, but they come from natural things, but the processes just change them. And so if you're trying to eat a whole food diet as close to nature as possible, you just want to reduce all that stuff as much as you can. With GAPS, that was one thing that I really learned was a lot of the stuff in the health food world, like carrageenan and all these things that you think is, well, it's in healthy products. It's in the health food shop products. It's got to be okay. It's in an organic product. They're not natural foods and things like soy lecithin and stuff like that. They're so highly processed. Your body doesn't know what to do with them. Yeah, right. It can't use them. Yeah. So why have them in your food?
Yeah. One of my mentors was doing a workshop and he's like, oh, they pull this out of the apple and then they realize, oh, no, you need to have it with the flavonoids and you need to add this. And he goes, by the end of it, you just need to eat the fucking apple.
Exactly. Seeds and all. I remember Cindy O'Meara telling us that years ago. Just eat the apple, seeds and all. You'll get what you need.
Wow. True. Yeah. What's a good, I was wondering, have you had breakfast this morning?
Yes, I didn't have much. I just had bacon and egg.
Oh, nice. That was going to be my question. What did you have for breakfast this morning? I love hearing that.
I was rushing this morning. But bacon and egg is pretty common for me. Usually I have a spoonful of sauerkraut with it. Yeah. Or yesterday I had yogurt with fruit as well as a cup of stock. And
dinner? What was your dinner last night?
Last night. Soup. Nice. We have a lot of soup. So I'm also, if you follow my stories on Instagram or anything, you know that I'm like passionate about not wasting food. And so yesterday was leftover lamb roast with leftover roast veggies, and there was a pumpkin soup, some chicken stock and some potato and some leftover rice, and that was a soup.
Wow. That's so cool. That's
so it was very tasty.
Yeah.
That excites me, eh?
That's cool. Yeah.
Finish off everything in the fridge, start afresh the next day.
Yeah. One of my goals this year, we did this massive goal setting thing at the start of the year, and one of my goals in my top 4 was learn more about how to cook healthy. So I'll be researching the shit out of this stuff. Like,
good.
after this.
You can follow my Instagram stories. I do cooking videos.
Yeah, definitely.
Quirky cooking.
I think most part we're really good. It's just like the little things like that, like I'm having a coconut milk that has guar gum in it or something like that. It'll be all right. I'll have it for a couple of days and then.
And I love just having like some out there stuff, like when you make your own coconut. I'm going to make that coconut milk, and just for other people to see a male making that. You know, and we're like,
that'd be awesome.
Covered in tattoos and shit. Like, it's like it just sort of throws people off. Like, I can do that shit.
Make sure you tag me so I can repost it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we'll tag. I actually made last year. I made your the mussels, chili mussels, the chili mussels.
Nice.
Yeah, they were so good, so good. I've never cooked mussels before. I was like, all right, well, here's a mussel recipe. What's do you have a favorite recipe out of the new cookbook that you recommend that I should do? That it's a personal favorite of yours?
Do you want a savoury or sweet?
Savoury and sweet.
Okay.
Just have a recipe, please.
Well, a good summer one right now with the hot weather would be the fish tacos.
Yes.
So it's marinated, like I usually use barramundi or whatever, but marinated fish, and it's got the fresh red cabbage slaw, and I usually do a homemade chili mayo with it and spinach wraps, and it is just so fresh and so much flavour. I love that one.
That's amazing. That's me.
So that's probably a good summer one to try.
Cook that tonight.
With the desserts, if you haven't tried the pumpkin brownie pudding with the peanut butter caramel sauce, I highly recommend it.
Oh my god!
Yeah, that's
God. And how do you?
And that's a good one for so many diets because it's egg-free, grain-free, dairy-free, gluten-free, and it's just got a bit of honey for sweetener.
And do you just play? Like, are you just in the kitchen just playing? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, ever since I was a kid. We grew up, we had no TV growing up. We were a very creative family. My mum is an amazing cook and grew a lot in our backyard. Plus, we had a next door neighbour who owned a trawler, so we'd get fresh seafood. Plus, living in Cairns, we grew up with the beautiful produce in the markets. And mum would just cook everything from scratch. And she taught us to cook from a really young age. By the time we were old enough to stand on a stool in the kitchen, we were helping with cooking. And she also encouraged us to experiment and make up our own recipes. So, you know, I'd be there making up recipes for chocolate cake when I was 7. They weren't very good, but my dad always said they were good. And
was it like sugar and flour?
All that kind of stuff. You know, we still had flour and sugar, but we had a lot of good food as well. And my sister and I, my older sister and I, would get a little metho burner and go down into the garage and make up recipes on there and the saucepan. By the time she was like 16, 17, she was cooking out of gourmet traveler recipes, you know, from the magazines. And I just copied everything she did, of course. And so we were always experimenting. Pretty much everyone in my family, except for my dad, can cook and cook really well. So I grew up with that, you know, culture of use what you've got, you know, whatever's in season, don't waste it, use it. You didn't just get a recipe and then go buy the ingredients. You'd see what you had and then cook from that. And I remember when I was learning to cook saying to my mum, I just want to follow a recipe. And she's like, no, you've just got to change it for this and this and this because that's what we've got. And I'm like, I just want to follow a recipe for once. But yeah, she taught us to be really creative with our cooking. Cool. And so when I started having, you know, all these food intolerances and the naturopath telling me you can't eat this, 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 and this, to me it was like, okay, this is a challenge. If I can't have that, what can I have? And so then I'd start swapping things and playing around with like family favorite recipes and changing them to make them healthier and to have, you know, less food reactions. And then with GAPS, that was another step in the challenge. Okay, now I can't have starches. What can I have? I just think it's a challenge. I think it's fun. So when I don't have much left in the fridge, freezer, and pantry, I'm like, okay, this is cool. What can I think of? And I find it a lot of fun.
Yeah, wow. This has really motivated me, hey. Like, I'm so pumped now to just cook something really good. And I'll definitely recommend your book to every single one of my clients, because it's just...
Oh, thank you.
It's just, it's you've made it so easy. It's nice. It's a nice read compared to many other ones I find. And it's got everything for this way of life that not many people know about. But it's just basically, this way of life is the way of life of millions and millions of years. You know, plus we get a little...
I really wanted to make the book simple and accessible for anyone because, well, Isaac's moved out of home now, and, you know, the others are all at that age, and I want them to be able to have a cookbook where it's familiar food, but it's also very simple. They can just go to the grocery store if that's all they've got access to, and they can just get what they need, and it doesn't take hours in the kitchen. And I've had people say to me, but isn't it really difficult to cook for gut health? I'm like, actually, it's simplified my cooking. I just pulled right back to basic ingredients, and I kept it so simple, and that's how we healed. And I'm so used to cooking and eating simply now that it's like, yeah, if you see one of these really fancy recipes that take forever, it's like, eh. I mean, now and then it's fun, but most
like
people are too busy. And most people, if you're unwell, that's the last thing you want is a complicated recipe. So, I just wanted it to be really doable for anyone who's not well or they're just learning.
How's Isaac doing now? Is he's sweet?
He's good. He's had ups and downs when he's not been really careful with his diet, but he knows that, and he's pretty much on top of it. Like, you'll see him with his friends and they're all eating rubbish, and he'll be like, no, I'm not having that, it's got sugar in it, because he knows he gets anxious if he has sugar. And he gets breakouts on his skin. So he doesn't even like to have coconut sugar, because he says, nah, it doesn't suit me, I think it's best if I just stick to honey. And he's very careful with the way he eats, which is really good. And now that he's cooking for himself, he was making a lamb roast and veggies last night, and he rang me and he said, oh, Mum, it's taking longer than you said it would. He said, but I did put it in partially frozen. I'm like, okay, well, that will be why. So he's still learning, but he's doing really well.
That's sick.
Like, I got a friend whose son, Marky's son's only eating organic food. He's not even, he's just starting to talk now, I think. But he goes, if they're at daycare and they give him like a piece of cake or something, he's running around like,
he'd be getting nuts,
doing completely different. And this is probably so many kids having a pop up. You know what I mean? They don't realize that they're making it harder for himself, like to look after and have this screaming kid running around. And it's just like, you yourself now, like you've just quit coffee since January 1st, and completely calmer.
Yeah, I actually think I've done a bit of damage that's going to take some time to heal. That's what that's what it feels.
Adrenal fatigue type stuff? Or?
Well, I didn't really... I felt great on coffee, and I started having bulletproofs, and I was having good fats and stuff, but I just... to be honest, I wake up now and I go and get some sun. I went into the beach this morning and I came back and I just feel a little bit like... it's my body's waiting for that kick of like stimulation. And without it, I feel it takes about 10 a.m. and my natural hormones start to like ramp up, which I'm like, fuck, I've probably done some probably need to heal for a while from that. You know what I mean?
Because I know with the Lise, the nutritionist that I work with, she talks about how when you've got adrenal fatigue, having coffee will hide that. And then you have to keep having more coffee though because it will affect your adrenals. So then you need more and more coffee. And then when you start to pull it back or get rid of it, then you often crash at first, but then you'll heal. And
I feel I got crazy responses from my brain straight away. It was straight away like really clear and really this outweighs the high of the coffee, because I feel like I can actually just take my time with things. My thoughts aren't so linear, and
do you know what really the body aches? Because he was getting body aches sort of in his lower back. Do you know what that could have been? During his post, like when he came with the coffee, straight away body aches every time.
Okay, because I had a friend who did the same. She was having like 6 coffees a day, and she had major leg aches when she got off it.
Okay.
But I've only ever had I'm more of a 1 coffee a day kind of person, and so I've never really had that. And I make sure I have a whole bottle of water first and sit in the sun and have like an hour, and then I'll have a coffee.
Yeah,
but I don't
wasn't
always
doing
have a
that.
coffee.
Yeah, if you don't always
Yeah.
have one, that's you're in control then.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
thing. I want to be in control of it. I want to have control
Yeah,
over it.
exactly.
And I think it's such a big discipline because it was such a big part of my life. And I only have
it's very
one
addictive.
a day. But
Okay.
so I thought
But
I was in control, but I just
It's so different for everyone though, because I
Yeah.
found when both of my sons had brain scans and they worked through their, DNA and brain and all that, because both of them have had, all sorts of chronic illness stuff over the years. And one of the things that they said was genetically, neither of my boys should be having coffee because they don't cope with the caffeine. And so some people just genetically can't handle it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
yang, very yang. Hey.
Oh, well, the shamans call it empty fire, and that's exactly what it feels like. I just go
Interesting.
I want to just take over the world.
Yeah.
And then about 2 p.m. I'm like, I'm tired.
Yeah. Crash.
Yeah, true.
So
Yeah.
it's been good.
So interesting.
Yeah.
All right, well,
All right.
that's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect time. 50
Thank you so
minutes.
much for your time today. That was
You're
such
welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's nice to meet you guys.
For sure. And would love to, if you're ever down this way or we're ever up that way, I want to check out Cairns because mum, as you know, my mum and dad grew up there for a lot of their life. So I'd love to check it out.
Come visit.
And I'd love to have one of your meals.
Yeah, sure. I'm always, it's a bit of an open house here, so come by.
That'd be amazing.
There's generally chocolate something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
And Sam, when you're up this end, I'll cook yourself one of your own meals.
Okay, that sounds fun.
Yeah. You can let me know.
Kathy's been cooking a lot of your stuff.
Yeah, Kathy really backs it. Yeah.
And every time we go up there, we were up there for Christmas Day, and what do we
Oh.
have?
We had the trifle. We had little chocolate ball
It
things.
was friggin' it's
I've
just
had
heaven.
your chicken lemon before.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I've
nice.
had, what else have we done? We've had a lot.
Yeah.
It's honestly, I say, truth in my heart, it's my favorite cookbook ever.
It's just easiest, best cook. Yeah, like the apple pie for me is just the best. And you feel great after it.
And for everyone
that's
listening,
good.
you can just go Quirky Cooking on your Instagram and then go for a link in there and
Yeah. If you sort of just Google quirky cooking or whatever, it'll all come up. But there's Instagram, Facebook, Telegram, the blog. I've kind of moved my podcasts over to YouTube now because I haven't really been doing them lately, but I'm getting back to it. The book kind of took over my life for the last few months. So it's like now I'm like coming out of the fog going, I can do other things now.
yeah, for sure.
It's great.
All right, awesome. Well,
That's sick.
thank you. I love it. And we'll definitely do it again one day. I really enjoyed this one. Really enjoyed this one.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys.
All right, thank you. Have a good day.
Catch you later.
You too.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.